Amara had always been an observant child. While other children played and laughed without a care in the world, she noticed things. She noticed when Mrs. Oka, their mathematics teacher, was having a bad day. She noticed when the school cat was limping. And recently, she had begun to notice something very strange about her new classmate, Oma. Oma had joined their class 3 weeks ago, arriving from a village somewhere in the eastern part of the country. She was a pretty girl with bright eyes and an easy smile. But there was something about her that made Amara's skin prickle with unease. Perhaps it was the way Oma's eyes seemed to hold secrets far too heavy for a 9-year-old, or the way she carried herself with an unusual confidence that bordered on authority. But what truly caught Amara's attention were the lollipops. Every morning, Oma would arrive at school with a small cloth bag filled with the most beautiful lollipops anyone had ever seen. They weren't the ordinary sweets sold at the school canteen or the local shops. These lollipops seemed to shimmer in the light, their colors more vibrant than anything natural, swirling with patterns that seemed to move when you looked at them closely. If you're enjoying this mysterious beginning, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to never miss our captivating stories. The first time Amara saw one of these lollipops, she was sitting in her usual spot during break time, reading a book under the big mango tree. She looked up to see Oma surrounded by a group of their classmates, all staring at the candy in her hands with glazed expressions. "Would you like one, Kemi?" Oma asked sweetly, holding out a lollipop that sparkled like liquid gold in the sunlight. Kemi, who was usually shy and rarely spoke to anyone, nodded eagerly and reached out for the candy. The moment her fingers touched the lollipop, something changed in her eyes. The bright curiosity that normally lived there seemed to dim, replaced by a strange, dreamy look. "Thank you, Oma," Kemi said in a flat, mechanical voice that didn't sound like her own. Amara frowned and went back to her book, but she kept glancing up at the group. One by one, Oma offered lollipops to different children. Emeka, the class clown who never stopped making jokes, became quiet and docile after accepting his treat. Blessing, who was known for her fierce independence, suddenly began following Oma around like a lost puppy. By the end of the week, nearly half of grade 4 Gold had accepted Oma's lollipops, and they all exhibited the same strange behavior. They would gather around Oma during break time, hanging on her every word with vacant expressions. They would do whatever she asked without question, sharing their lunch money, completing her assignments, and even taking blame for things she had done wrong. But when Oma approached Amara with her cloth bag of swirling sweets, something inside the young girl recoiled. "Would you like a lollipop, Amara?" Oma asked, her voice carrying an odd musical quality that seemed to echo strangely in Amara's ears. "They're very special. My grandmother makes them herself." Amara looked at the offered candy and felt a chill run down her spine. Up close, she could see that the colors in the lollipop weren't just swirling. They were moving with purpose, forming patterns that hurt her eyes to follow. There was something wrong with these sweets, something that made every instinct in her body scream danger. "No, thank you," Amara said firmly, closing her book and standing up. "I don't eat candy from strangers." For just a moment, Oma's sweet smile faltered, and Amara caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating in her eyes. But the expression was gone so quickly that Amara almost thought she had imagined it. "That's okay," Oma said, her smile returning. "Maybe another time." But Amara knew there wouldn't be another time. Something deep in her soul warned her to stay far away from those beautiful, terrible lollipops. As the days passed, Amara watched with growing concern as more of her classmates fell under Oma's strange influence. The girl with the magical lollipops had created an invisible web of control that stretched across their classroom. Are you as intrigued as Amara about these mysterious lollipops? Let us know in the comments what you think is really going on. Mrs. Adebayo, their class teacher, seemed oblivious to the change. When she called on students who had eaten Oma's lollipops, they responded correctly but without enthusiasm. When she assigned group work, these students naturally gravitated toward Oma, eager to do all the work while she received the credit. "Oma is such a natural leader," Mrs. Adebayo commented to another teacher within Amara's hearing. The other children simply adore her. But Amara knew it wasn't adoration she was seeing. It was something far more sinister. The real trouble began when Amara started to resist more actively. During a group science project, she was assigned to work with Oma and 3 other pupils who had all accepted the mysterious lollipops. While the others busily prepared materials and wrote reports under Oma's direction, Amara sat back and observed. "Amara, why aren't you helping?" Oma asked, her voice carrying that strange musical quality again. "I am helping," Amara replied calmly. "I'm observing. That's part of the scientific method too." Oma's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everyone needs to participate equally. Isn't that right, Kemi?" Kemi nodded eagerly, her glazed eyes fixed on Oma's face. "Yes, everyone should participate equally." "I'll participate in my own way," Amara said firmly, making notes in her notebook about the behavior she was witnessing. That afternoon, as Amara walked home from school, she felt eyes watching her. She turned around several times but saw only the usual bustle of students and parents making their way home. But the feeling persisted, a crawling sensation between her shoulder blades that made her quicken her pace. That night, Amara told her mother about the strange girl in her class and the peculiar lollipops. "Some children just have a way of attracting others," her mother, Mrs. Okori, said gently as she tucked Amara into bed. "Perhaps this Oma is simply a charismatic child. You shouldn't let jealousy make you think badly of her." "It's not jealousy, Mummy," Amara protested. "There's something wrong with those lollipops. The children who eat them act different afterward." Mrs. Okori smiled and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Sometimes our imagination can run away with us, my dear. Try to be kind to your new classmate. She's probably just trying to make friends." The dreams began on a Thursday night, exactly 1 week after Amara had refused Oma's lollipop for the 3rd time. Amara found herself standing in her classroom, but everything was wrong. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickly green light, and the desks had been arranged in a perfect circle around Oma, who sat in the center like a queen holding court. All of Amara's classmates were there, but their eyes were completely white, rolled back in their heads, and they swayed in unison like trees in a strong wind. The dreams are getting more intense. If you want to see how this supernatural story unfolds, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. "Join us, Amara," Oma called out, her voice echoing strangely in the dream space. She held out a lollipop that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Don't you want to belong?" "No," Amara said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I don't want any part of this." Oma's face twisted with anger, and suddenly she wasn't a 9-year-old girl anymore. Her features aged and warped, becoming something ancient and cruel. "You will join us eventually," the thing that had been Oma hissed. "Everyone always does. No one can resist forever." Amara woke up with a gasp, her heart pounding, and her nightgown soaked with sweat. The dream had felt more real than any dream she'd ever had, and the echo of Oma's threatening voice lingered in her ears. The next day at school, Oma approached Amara during lunch break. The other children who followed her stayed back, forming a loose semicircle that effectively trapped Amara against the school fence. "I heard you had trouble sleeping last night," Oma said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Amara's blood ran cold. "How could you possibly know that?" "I know lots of things," Oma replied, pulling out another one of her mysterious lollipops. This one was deep purple with silver swirls that seemed to move independently of the candy itself. "Are you sure you won't reconsider? This one is special. I made it just for you." The lollipop seemed to call to Amara, whispering promises of peace and belonging. For a moment, she almost reached out for it. The isolation of being the only student who could see what was really happening was wearing on her. It would be so easy to just take the candy, to join the others in their dreamy contentment. But then she remembered the dream, remembered the ancient cruelty she had seen in Oma's transformed face, and she stepped back. "I said no," Amara declared loudly enough that other students nearby turned to look. I don't want your lollipops, and I don't want to be your friend. The mask of sweetness fell away from Oma's face completely. You're making a mistake, she said quietly, her voice carrying an undercurrent of menace that made several nearby students unconsciously step away. Nobody says no to me forever. That night, the dreams were worse. Amara found herself trapped in a world where the school had become a twisted maze of corridors that led nowhere. Oma appeared around every corner, offering different lollipops and making increasingly dire threats when Amara refused them. You can't hide from me, Dream Oma taunted as Amara ran through endless hallways. I can reach you anywhere, anytime. In your dreams, in your waking hours, in the spaces between breath and heartbeat. The third night, Amara didn't dream of the school at all. Instead, she found herself standing by a dark river under a moonless sky. The water moved with an oily, unnatural current, and she could hear voices whispering from beneath its surface. Oma stood on the opposite bank, but she looked different again. Younger somehow, more vulnerable. Help me, this version of Oma called out across the water. I didn't choose this. She made me do it. Grandmother made me do it. But even as Amara felt a stab of sympathy for the girl, the scene shifted. The vulnerable Oma was replaced by the familiar figure with the cruel smile and ancient eyes. Soon, the thing wearing Oma's face promised. Very soon you'll understand that resistance is futile. Amara woke up screaming. Mrs. Okori had always been a practical woman, but she couldn't ignore the dramatic change in her daughter. Amara, who had always been a sound sleeper, now woke up multiple times each night, often crying out in fear. Dark circles had appeared under her eyes, and she picked at her food without appetite. Amara, what's really going on at school? Mrs. Okori asked gently as she sat on her daughter's bed Friday morning. And don't tell me it's nothing. A mother knows when something is troubling her child. This is where a mother's intuition becomes crucial to our story. If you're a parent watching this, you'll understand Mrs. Okori's concern completely. Amara looked at her mother's worried face and felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her. She had tried to handle this alone, tried to be strong, but the dreams were getting worse, and she could feel her resistance weakening with each passing day. There's a girl in my class named Oma, Amara began hesitantly. She gives out lollipops that do something to the other children. They change after they eat them, Mama. They become like robots that only do what she wants. Mrs. Okori frowned. What do you mean they change? They stop being themselves. Kemi used to be so shy, but now she follows Oma everywhere and does whatever she's told. Emika doesn't tell jokes anymore. Blessing gave Oma all her lunch money and said it was because she wanted to share. Perhaps this girl is just very persuasive, Mrs. Okori suggested, but there was uncertainty in her voice. Mummy, she comes into my dreams, Amara whispered, her voice breaking. She threatens me in my sleep. She knows things she shouldn't know. There's something very wrong with her, and I'm scared. The desperation in her daughter's voice made Mrs. Okori's heart clench. She had dismissed Amara's concerns as childhood imagination, but the physical evidence of her daughter's distress was undeniable. Tell me about these dreams, Mrs. Okori said, settling more comfortably on the bed. Amara described the nightmares in detail, the transformed classroom, the endless hallways, the dark river, and the threats that followed her from sleep into waking hours. As she spoke, Mrs. Okori's expression grew more troubled. And you say other children have changed after eating these lollipops? Yes, Mama. More than half the class now. They all act the same way, like they're asleep but still walking around. Mrs. Okori was quiet for a long moment. She had grown up in a village where stories of supernatural influence were taken seriously, but she had tried to raise Amara in a more modern, rational way. Now she wondered if her dismissal of the old ways had left her daughter vulnerable. I'm going to speak with your teacher today, Mrs. Okori decided, and I want you to promise me something. If this girl approaches you again, you find an adult immediately. Don't try to handle this alone. I promise, Mummy. But even as Amara made the promise, she wondered if adults would be able to see what she saw, or if they too would fall under Oma's strange influence. That afternoon, Mrs. Okori arrived at the school just as classes were ending. She had taken time off work, something she rarely did, because her mother's instincts were screaming that her daughter was in real danger. She found Mrs. Adebayo preparing to leave for the day and asked for a few minutes to discuss her concerns about Amara's behavior and her interactions with the new student Oma. "Oh, Oma is a lovely child," Mrs. Adebayo said immediately. "Very well behaved and quite popular with the other students. Are you sure Amara isn't just having trouble adjusting to having a new classmate? Sometimes children feel threatened when someone new joins their established social group. My daughter mentioned that this girl gives out candy to the other children. Is this something you've observed?" Mrs. Adebayo paused, thinking. "Yes, I have noticed that Oma shares sweets with her classmates. I thought it was sweet of her. A nice way to make friends. The children certainly seem to enjoy them. Has there been any change in the behavior of the students who accept these candies?" "Well," Mrs. Adebayo considered this carefully. "Now that you mention it, some of the more energetic children have become quite calm lately, but I assumed they were simply maturing, settling into the school routine." Mrs. Okori felt a chill run down her spine. "I'd like to observe the class for a few minutes, if that's possible, and I'd like to meet this Oma, and perhaps speak with her parents." "I'm afraid that might be difficult," Mrs. Adebayo said. "Oma's parents live quite far away. She's staying with relatives here in town while attending school. But you're welcome to observe the class on Monday morning." As Mrs. Okori walked back to her car, she noticed a group of children standing under a tree in the school compound. At the center of the group was a girl who could only be Oma, pretty, well-dressed, and holding what appeared to be a small cloth bag. Mrs. Okori stopped and watched as Oma distributed candies to the waiting children. Even from a distance, there was something unsettling about the scene. The children's eagerness bordered on desperation, and they accepted the sweets with an almost ritual reverence. But what truly disturbed Mrs. Okori was the moment when Oma looked up and met her eyes across the schoolyard. The girl couldn't have been more than 9 years old, but the gaze that fixed on Mrs. Okori was ancient and knowing, filled with a malevolent intelligence that made her skin crawl. Oma smiled and gave a small wave, as if she knew exactly why Mrs. Okori was there and found it amusing. Mrs. Okori hurried to her car, her hands shaking as she started the engine. She had seen enough folklore and experienced enough of the world to recognize when something supernatural was at work. Her daughter wasn't imagining things, and this was far beyond what the school could handle. She put a call across to the principal, and Oma's guardian and parent were invited. It was time to take more serious action. We're now reaching the climax of our story. Don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying this tale of supernatural mystery. The next Monday, the meeting that followed was unlike anything the headmaster, Mr. Chukwu, had experienced in his 20 years of educational administration. Mrs. Okori, her husband, and their daughter presented their observations and concerns, describing the systematic changes in the affected children's behavior and the supernatural elements they had witnessed. "We need to be careful," Mrs. Okori warned. "If this child has these abilities, there's likely someone behind her who's even more dangerous." This is where the mystery begins to unravel. What do you think we'll discover about Oma's background? "We don't understand what this is about," her uncle, Mr. Emeka, said as they sat in the headmaster's office with the Okoris and Mrs. Adebayo. "Oma has been a model student since she came to stay with us. No trouble at all." "Actually, that's part of the problem," Mrs. Okori said gently. "We believe your niece may have been influenced by supernatural forces, and she's now affecting other children in her class." Mr. Emeka and his wife exchanged worried glances. "We knew something was different about her when she arrived," Mrs. Emeka admitted reluctantly. "She was so controlled, so mature for her age, but we thought it was because of the trauma of leaving her village." "What can you tell us about her life before she came here?" the headmaster asked. "Not much," Mr. Emeka said. "Our sister, Oma's mother, died when the child was very young. Oma has been raised primarily by her paternal grandmother in a remote village. When the grandmother became too old to care for her properly, the family decided she should come to the city for better educational opportunities. "Do you know anything about this grandmother?" Mrs. Okori pressed. The guardians looked uncomfortable. "There were rumors," Mrs. Amika said quietly. "People in the village said she had unusual knowledge, that she could influence people's minds and dreams, but we thought they were just superstitions." When Oma's father arrived, the full scope of the problem became clear. Mr. Obiora was a simple farmer, clearly out of his depth in the urban school environment, but his distress was genuine. "I knew something was wrong when I sent her away," he said, wringing his hands. "But my mother, Oma's grandmother, she insisted it was time for the child to join the world. She said Oma had special gifts that needed to be cultivated." "What kind of gifts?" Mr. Okori asked directly. Mr. Obiora looked around the room nervously. "My mother is what some people call a river priestess. She serves the old spirits, the ones that live in the water and the deep places of the earth. When Oma was 7, my mother took her to the sacred river for what she called awakening." "You allowed this?" Mrs. Okori asked, unable to hide her dismay. "I was not there," Mr. Obiora said defensively. "I was working in another state, trying to earn money for the family. When I returned, Oma was changed. She could do things, influence people, make them do what she wanted. My mother said it was a blessing, that Oma would never want for anything, because people would always want to help her." "But she's just a child," the headmaster protested. "She can't possibly understand the implications of such power." "That's the problem," Mr. Obiora said sadly. "The spirits don't care about age or understanding. They use whoever is available to them. And my mother, she thought she was giving Oma an advantage in life. She didn't realize she was stealing her childhood, her innocence." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Oma wasn't evil. She was a victim, a child who had been given power she couldn't control and responsibilities she couldn't understand. "What do we do now?" Mrs. Adebayo asked quietly. "We take her home," Mr. Obiora said firmly. "Back to the village, back to the river where this all began. There are ways to undo what has been done, but they must be performed in the same place where the original ritual occurred." "And the other children?" Mrs. Okoro asked. "Once Oma is freed from the spirit's influence, the hold over the other children should break naturally," Mr. Obiora explained. "But it must be done quickly. The longer she remains in this state, the stronger the connection becomes and the harder it will be to sever. We're approaching the resolution of our supernatural tale. If you want to see how stories like this end, make sure you stay subscribed for more content like this." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Obiora made arrangements to take Oma back to their village, while the school worked to manage the situation with the affected students and their families. Mrs. Okoro insisted on accompanying them, despite the protests of both her husband and Mr. Obiora. "My daughter was targeted by whatever is controlling Oma," she said firmly. "I need to see this through to the end, to make sure Amara is truly safe." The journey to the village took most of a day, traveling first by bus and then by a series of increasingly rough roads, until they reached a community that seemed to exist outside of modern time. The houses were traditional mud brick structures with thatched roofs, and the people moved with the unhurried pace of those whose lives were governed by seasons rather than clocks. Oma had been unusually quiet during the journey, but as they approached her grandmother's compound, she became agitated. "I don't want to go back," she said, her voice carrying that strange musical quality. "I like who I am now. I like having power." "Power that isn't truly yours," her father said sadly. "Power that comes with a price you're too young to understand." Oma's grandmother, Mama Nkem, was waiting for them beside her hut. She was an ancient woman, so old that her exact age had been forgotten, with eyes that held the depth of deep water and skin marked with traditional scarification. "So," she said, looking at the group of travelers, You've come to undo my work. I've come to free my daughter, Mr. Obiora said, but his voice shook slightly in the presence of his formidable mother. The child was chosen by the spirits, Mama Nkem said firmly. They saw her potential, her strength. I simply helped her fulfill her destiny. Her destiny is to be a child, Mrs. Okori interjected, surprised by her own boldness. To learn and grow and make mistakes and discover who she wants to become. You've stolen that from her. Very well, she said. We will go to the river at sunset. But understand, once this is undone, it cannot be redone. The spirits do not give second chances. Mama Nkem had prepared for the ceremony with careful attention to traditional protocols. She carried a collection of items that had been blessed and prepared according to ancient practices. White cloth, palm wine, kola nuts, tubers of yam and cocoyams, plantains, effigy, and herbs, whose names Mrs. Okori didn't recognize. This is the moment of truth in our story, the ritual that will determine Oma's fate. The spirits of the river are ancient, Mama Nkem explained as they approached the water's edge. They existed long before humans walked this land, and they will exist long after we are gone. When I brought Oma here before, I asked them to possess her and make her gather disciples for the spirits. Now she no longer wants to belong to the spirits. We have come to disengage her. She threw in all the items and dipped Oma's feet in the river 7 times. They undressed her and bathed her in the river. She got dressed and they set out for home. That was how she was made whole. I hope you learned something from this story. Give your children the snacks they need and warn them to be contented with what they have. If it wasn't for Amara, those kids would have remained tied to what they don't know. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories. Share the video, give me a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comment section.